Hey guys, this is JBird from UGX Mods, and we're going to be doing another tutorial today, and this is going to be dealing with patches. So the first thing that we're actually going to be going over is curve patches versus terrain patches, and how we can implement those. The second thing I'm going to be going over today is primitives, which will include bevels, cylinders, square cylinders, and cones, and how you can use those to add detail to your map. And the last thing I'll go over is just some techniques that I use while dealing with patches, as well as like some of the uses for them. Alright guys, let's get started. Alright guys, so we're in Radiant now, and we're back in our test map. So what we're going to do is just going to go over really quickly, so this is basically some stuff that I did with some patchwork and whatnot, so you can see some curves and whatnot going on. But I'm going to just really quickly go over how to create curve patches and terrain patches really quickly. So if you create a brush, you go to patch, curve, simple curve patch. You can select how many vertices you can select from. So I'm going to go by 3x3. That's typically what I do with a curve patch, and that's what default is set. So it's going to convert it into a patch here, which is a 2D plane. And then what I can do is click V to go into vertex edit mode, and you can see all the vertices are here, and they typically alternate between green and pink. And you can left click drag to box select a bunch of vertices, or just one vertice in particular, and you can hold Alt and then left click drag to move it. So you can see that even if I like just select a whole row here, I could actually go and drag that off and then click R to rotate, and then just kind of rotate it, and I can start making almost like a road going through here. So you can kind of get like a road shape going on. Kind of play around with the vertices a bit to get it more of a curve shape, but you know, so that's a curve patch. Not too much going on there. If you want it to be less or more detailed, another shortcut you can use is holding Shift and the square braces. So left square brace is going to reduce the amount of vertices, and right square brace is going to increase the amount of vertices. So you know, somewhere around here or there is pretty good, depending on what you're going for. So that's a curve patch. So we can do the same thing. Create a brush, go patch, simple terrain patch. So it's always going to do from the direction that you're looking at in the 2D grid here. So you notice how it's a plane going this way. If I was at the side there, it would have created a small little plane going along the side. So we can go in here. I did a 2x2 terrain patch, but this time terrain patches don't curve. You notice how like if I dragged off the corner, it was kind of creating vertices to arch between the two vertices. This is more of like a direct one-to-one, so if I move a vertice, it can kind of go wherever I place it. And then what I can do is, say I wanted more vertices in between here, what I can do is I want a row to be in between these two vertices to come along here. So I'll select these two with the box select, I'll hold Control Shift A, and then I'll pop in a what's called a loop cut right here. So we have a loop right in between the two. So I can do that on this side as well. Like I could select here and get one to go right down the middle. If I want to select a loop cut, I can hold Shift and then left click. So you can see it selected all along there. If I select it again, it's going to do this side. So it'll just alternate between the two. And I can do that anywhere really. So like you can see it's selected all along here, or I can click it one more time, it'll go along here and it'll go back. So that's a neat little loop cut select trick. If I want to get rid of a loop, I can hold Control Shift and Q. So I have this selected, Control Shift Q is going to get rid of it. So I can do the same with this one, and we're back to where we began. So I could really quickly just like start adding some vertices in here, you know, start playing around with it, get another loop going, and it's like, oh well, maybe I didn't want this loop, I can get rid of that. Or then another trick is I could actually split along a loop as well. So if I have this entire loop selected, I can do Control Shift X, and that's gonna, you notice how this line just got a bit thicker? That's because if I deselect everything and then reselect one, it's now split into two separate patches now. So now if you have two patches and you want to join them into one patch, if all the vertices along the connecting faces are identically lined up, so like these are both together, these are both together, and these are both together, you could go back out of vertex mode, select the two, and then click W, and it will join them back together. Say you wanted to connect them, but they were kind of like all over the place. The vertices are kind of like, oh, this one's over here, this one's over here, whatever. And it's like, oh, well, I want these two to join, but I don't know how to connect the two. You select one, whatever one you want it to merge towards. So I'm going to select this one because I want this one to get dragged over to there. Then I'm going to select this one. Then I'm going to click V. I'm going to select this vertice and this vertice, and I'm going to hit W, and that's going to merge it to there. The same button that we did to merge the patches together. This is called welding. So I'm going to weld this vertice to this one. So I selected those two, I hit W. Now you notice there's still two separate patches because you have to get out of vertex mode by clicking V and then hit W, and we're back to one patch again. And then if you click S, you can get the surface inspector. You notice the texture is a little wonky. You can hit light map, might make it a little better. You know, play around with the settings in here. You can rotate it 90 degrees. Another trick is if you want to shift the texture around just slightly, you can hold Alt and right click and drag, and you can kind of drag it around, which is a neat little trick. Okay, so that's our little introduction to patches. So we're going to move on to the primitives. So a primitive is something like a cylinder or a square cylinder. So I actually created this little parking blocker thing. You see these in parking lots all the time. So what I actually ended up doing was I started off by creating a brush, and then I'm just going to texture it a caulk texture, and then I'm going to go patch, primitives, cylinder. So you'll notice this cylinder is actually a lot more round than the one that I just generated. What I can do is hold shift and the right square brace like we did with the curve patches, and this will act exactly like a curve patch. So if I go into vertex mode, you'll notice I got a loop here, I've got a loop here, and I got a loop here. So I can do the same loop select thing. So if I do one, it's going to do these corners here, or if I do it again, it's going to select that loop. So that's shift left click for the loop select, remember. And so I can kind of like play around with that. You know, I can rotate and move it around. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got into getting this sort of shape going on. So if I texture it like that, bumped up the vertices, I kind of got this going. So then you're probably wondering, okay, how do you do the dome? So what I ended up doing here for the dome was I just copy and pasted the top, or I copy and pasted the cylinder, and then I just kind of like, because then it can keep the dimensions here. So I'm going to go to the top view, I'm going to go to patch, primitives, cone. So obviously that doesn't look the same, so we're going to go into the vertex mode here, and I'm going to select this loop, the middle loop, and I'm going to drag it up to that one vertice that was at the top, the converging point. Then I'm going to select all the points, including that center point, and bring it back down a bit. And then I'm going to increase the vertices a bit. So shift and right square brace, and there we go. We got a cap. So say you wanted it more of a flatter cap, you could just drag this down, or maybe you wanted it to have a sharper edge to it. So why don't we try and actually do the cap tool. So we'll have this selected and do Shift C. That's going to cap both ends. I'm not going to have the bottom one visible, so I'm going to just deselect these and delete the bottom one. I'm going to have to bump up the vertices so that it's matching with this. And I could even grab this center vertice here and drag it up and maybe get a little bit of roundness going, but not too much. So you can see it's got like a harsh, sharp edge, but a little bit of curve to it still. So neat little trick there. The bottom is the same idea, just some cylinders that I did. So I'm just going to cheat, copy and paste those. And I did the same idea as this cap for here. So Shift C, I'm going to delete the bottom one, and then we're going to increase the vertices. This is Shift square brace like usual. I'm going to middle mouse to copy that texture, and voila, we got that going on. And this is the same idea, just another patch, another cylinder patch that I kind of just spread out along the ground and put a dirt texture. So that's kind of how I did that little blocker there. The bolts here are just models, really. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. So we have a wire. So the wire is actually made up of a bunch of different cylinders. So I started off with this base cylinder that I just laid out on the ground, and I like to use it as my base because it doesn't have any rotation to any of it, and it's locked onto the grid, so it's easy to work with. So I copy and pasted this, and I moved it over to the edge, lined it up, and then I went into vertex mode and I rotated the vertices slightly to get this little curve going. And if you take your time, you can kind of just step through and just make little little bits of curves and attach them together, and then you can get a nice looking wire going. So I'm going to really quickly just show you. So let's say I started off with just my little cylinder. I'm going to copy and paste it off. I'm going to line it up. I'm going to go into vertex mode by clicking V, R to rotate, and I'm going to kind of change the grid size here a little bit, kind of go 90 degrees. Click R to get out of rotate mode. I'm going to hold Alt and drag, and then I'm going to move this one, do the same idea, and just kind of shift it off a bit. So there we go, we got a little wire. And you can just kind of, this kind of took me about maybe 5 minutes of just playing with it and getting the vertices to line up, but if you take your time, you can make it look really cool. A nice example of what you can do with wires is I just made like a little cylinder here for a telephone pole, and I got a couple of them here, and I just made one simple wire. You can see one loop's here, the other loop is attached to the other pole, and then the center part I just drag down slightly to make it look like it's hanging. So there you go, that's a little thing that you can do with wires. Kind of neat to add some wires to your map to make it look a little less plain. You can add them on walls and whatnot. So another quick tip with terrain patches is you can create little decals on walls. So a quick tip here is you can actually go Control Shift and then left click to select the face. We've talked about this in a previous tutorial. And then what you can do is go Patch, Terrain, and then Faces to Terrain. So that's going to create a terrain patch where you selected that wall. So if I move this around a bit, you can see the wall is still there, but I got a nice little terrain patch that's literally right on the wall. So I could go in and get a little blood decal, apply that. I can go Textures, Texture, Fit Texture, and then maybe rotate it. Now it's not fitted. I gotta fit it again. Oh, okay, well, we'll just rotate the brush then. Alright, and there we go. We got a little blood on the wall. And then, so our last thing that we're going to go over is this little archway. So this actually involves two different things that I did, which was a square cylinder that I eventually converted into a patch, as well as a bevel that I capped off to get this. Because realistically, the wall only contains 3 brushes and that's it. The rest of it in the center here is all patchwork. So I'll start off by showing you how I did that. I went in, I created a brush. Let's go and just create that texture there. We're gonna go Patch, Primitives, Square Cylinder. So this is a square shape, like a rectangle, but it acts like a cylinder. You can see it's got the exact same loops there. Same idea, it acts just like a cylinder, except it's in the shape of a rectangle. So what we can do is I'm just gonna kind of use my other one as a guideline right now. So I can kind of just line this up here and then drag this down. So I actually did this in 4 parts. So I did the vertical here, the first part of the arch, the second part of the arch, and then the last part. So we'll go with that. And then I'm going to copy and paste this and drag it up, line it up, and then I'm going to just really quickly go into vertex mode, 90-degree turn here, and then I'm going to bring it right to the center. So bring your grid down if you need to, but I always like to keep it on the grid. So I'm not going to rotate this one because if I want to get a perfect arch going, I know that if I keep this in line with this one and this one, then this vertex is good. So what I can do is then line this middle one up with this middle one and this middle one, and that should be good as well. So that's about 1 grid down. And then we want to line this one up with this vertice and this vertice, and voila, we got a nice arching curve there that is actually following the grid. So then what we can do is just really quickly copy and paste, rotate this 180 degrees, we'll flip it over to the other side, and voila. We'll just look at the grid here because if you notice, one of these, this one in particular, is slightly off. So what I'm going to do is snap this edge to the grid. So I'm going to go down, lowest grid size, and I'm going to select that loop, this one right here. Then I'm going to hold Control and click G, and that's going to snap it to the grid. I'm going to do the same for this one. I'm going to hold, select this loop, I'm going to go Control and then G, and then it's snapped to the grid. So now that's lined up perfectly. Okay, so now you'll notice that if I were to try and fix the texture here, and go rotate it 90 degrees, it's not lining up. That's not good. So what I ended up doing was I converted these into patches. So you can see if I select the face, it's selecting the front only. So what I ended up doing was I went, selected one. Actually, I could probably select all of them. I'm not sure if this works or not. We'll see. And I went to curve, curve to terrain. Look at that. It'll convert all of them. Okay, so you can select all of those and go patch, curve to terrain. And then we're going to want to split off the faces. So I'm going to do that splitting tool. So we're going to select a loop along the vertical here. And I'm going to go with Control-Shift-X, and I'm going to do that with all the edges. So then we are left with a face on each side. So I'll do that with every single one. I believe that one's already split. And we'll do it with this one. Oops, I dragged that down. Hopefully that still works. Yeah, looks good. Okay, split this one. And you'll get used to the shortcuts eventually. It takes some time, but once you have them down, then it works pretty well. And there we go. So they're all split. So we're going to do that merging that we did before with the other patches. So we're going to merge the patches together. So as long as the vertices of the faces are in line with each other, you can merge. So I have these two selected, and I'm going to hit W. Ignore the texture mess up for now, but you can see that this is one patch now when I select it. So we'll go and do that with all these. So this whole face, we want to be one patch. So I'm going to hide that by clicking H, so I can just go in and really quickly join these all together. I'm going to hide that. We're going to select the back faces. I know you can't really see them, but they're there. We're going to hit W, and then I'm going to hide that. I'm going to select these ones. Ooh, this. What am I selecting? Oh, I'm selecting the pole. This one, and this one. Okay, W. I'm going to do Shift H to show my stuff that I was hiding before. So now let's fix the textures. We're going to go in, Surface Inspector, click S if it's not visible for you. We're going to hit Natural, and then we're going to go 90 degrees. And there you go. That outer one looks really good now. So we're going to do the same thing. Natural, 90 degrees. And you can do that with all of these. Natural, and then 90, and then natural, natural, and then 90. And there we go, we got a little archway going. So that's almost done here. The last thing I want to go over is that bevel that I was showing before. So like I said before, I'm just going to move this off to the side. Like I said before, the wall only consisted of 3 brushes, and the rest of it was patches. So we're going to go really quickly and make that wall. We'll just kind of go like that. We want it to be lined up with the top, and then we're going to bring this off to the other side, and it's lined up with the top, and then we're going to do a little upper part here. So I'm just copying and pasting right now. Really simple. Trying to move pretty quick here because there's a lot to cover with patches. We'll just go with a brick texture, and then you'll notice we have this little, cutout area that we're going to have to fill in. So what I'm going to do is create another brush, which we're going to convert to a bevel. We're going to line it up with the bottom of the arch and with the middle right here, and we're going to go patch. Remember to be facing it in the 2D grid as well. So you want to be looking right at the face. So patch, primitives, bevel. Okay, so the curve is actually going to fit better with this way, so we'll just drag it over to this side for now. And you'll notice it's following perfectly along our archway. So what we're going to do is do Control-Shift, the cap tool that we did before with the cylinder, but since we're doing a bevel, it's going to pop up with this dialog. So I'm going to do an inverted bevel so that you can see it's all this blue, the blue area is where it's going to go. So that's what we want, is we want it to fill in all of that area. So you'll see we have our little patch filling in there. We can delete the bevel, so I'm going to deselect the other stuff and delete the bevel. I'll select this and middle mouse the texture there so it'll line up perfectly with that. Do it to this side as well, and voila, we have a wall. And I'm just going to copy and paste this to the other side. And if I can just drag that over, middle mouse, and there we go, we got a little archway. So that covers everything for the primitives that I'm going to be going over in this tutorial. There's some other ones in there. There's square bevels, end caps, square end caps. There's a few of these. You can play around with them yourself. but these are the ones that I mainly use myself. The cylinders are really useful for wires and poles and whatnot. Square bevels I find are really good for archways and like square curves and whatnot. And then your bevels are really good for when you want to kind of cap off a wall like this in those sort of scenarios. Alright guys, so that's covered that. And so I'm just really quickly going to go through all of the shortcuts really quickly that we went through, and that's going to be the end of the tutorial. So what we did was we created a patch, and this is kind of our general thing that we can do. So if we want to add vertices, we can only do that to a terrain patch. We can't do that to a curve patch. So remember, to add a loop, all we have to do is Control-Shift-A. So that's how we're adding stuff. To remove, it's Control-Shift-Q, but you have to have an entire loop selected. If you want to merge vertices, you want to select one vert and then select another one. It's going to merge towards the first. So we click W. If we have two patches that we had selected in vertice mode, it's going to move towards the vertice of the first patch that's selected. So when I click W, it merges towards the one that is selected. The same merge button W, if you select two patches and you click W, it will convert into one patch. It usually messes up the texture, so you're going to have to go into the Surface Inspector by clicking S and then hitting Natural or Light Map, depending on what you're going for. So that will cover those. We can also get rid of the loop cut here if we don't want it, and we get one big patch. And then when it comes to curve patches, we have stuff like cylinders. If I can get one going, cylinders. So this is a pretty big cylinder. I can reduce the vertice count by holding Shift and doing left square brace, or I can increase the count by doing right square brace. So Shift left square, Shift right square. Alright, I believe that covers almost everything in this tutorial, and I hope this really helps you guys with like making more details for your maps, and it should be a good use for doing more than just the brushes, because brushes and models are what you see in very basic maps. When you see these more detailed maps, they usually contain a lot of patchwork, because that's when it can start getting into more intricate looking detail. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this tutorial. We're probably going to be covering actual terrain in the next one, so stay tuned for that. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.